Welcome to the Future Generations Podcast, providing you with the world-changing content necessary to inspire you, your family, and our planet to a life of optimal health potential. We'll help you make the choices that powerfully influence the lives you bring into this world. It's time to strengthen our resolve to do better now and for our future generations with your host, Dr. Stanton Hom.
Okay, welcome to the Future Generations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stanton Hom, and I have one of the most special guests that I don't know if this person knows. Well, I definitely know that you don't know where I first saw you speak, but I think it was 2014, DC, the International Chiropractic Pediatric Association Freedom for Family Wellness Summit. And it's crazy to think that we are 7 years later and we are literally fighting for a version of freedom that we've never really, in my opinion, never thought that it would be coming this quickly. And Dr. Kelly Brogan, you've been a beacon in so many ways, in so many evolutions of who you are, whether it's a clinician or not a clinician, licensed clinician, to homesteader, to all sorts of different things that I've absolutely loved watching your evolution as an amazing human being. But Kelly, I'd love for you to introduce yourself so our audience gets to know you both personally and professionally.
That's my favorite kind of introduction. Thank you. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the defining feature of my bio is that I have inhabited many different incarnations in this one lifetime so far, and that I have the, I guess, distinct privilege of having been a card-carrying, pharma-pushing psychiatrist who believes so much in psychiatric medications that I specialize in prescribing to pregnant and breastfeeding women. And took a very, very sharp left turn, as I do. I'm very interested in polarities and exploring kind of the depth of these seemingly adversarial energies in our midst. And then I went deep into holistic medicine and dedicated my practice to helping patients come off of all manner of medications. Learned a lot about that in 10 years. And now I'm mostly interested in the process of, self-discovery and personal integration and development, and what that has to do with reclaiming power. And that's a lot of my focus now.
It seems to be a consistent message, in virtually every, I would say, field today, in that you're noticing people just, they use the term waking up to whether you call it a cartel, whatever you want to call it, the level of like dependency, or some people would even call it enslavement to the system, is so pervasive. And so, like, in my opinion, it's like you can't even like turn left and right as a dad, and recognize that they're not after also your kids in so many ways. And so I would be really interested to see, because of all the different evolutions, is there any one like big influence that's essentially led you to the version you are today?
Yeah, my husband. In so many ways. I mean, the only mentor I've ever had is Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, and I worked with him for the last year of his life. And it was absolutely a heart and mind changing experience, mostly because he activated in me the power of faith in the human body, and it will never be extinguished. And I, through him, came to understand that personal belief and alignment with one's sort of nexus of control, which of course is our choices, right? Our daily choices even, is sufficient to resolve, integrate, transform anything that we would call disease, even terminal disease. I mean, his specialization was in long-term survival from metastatic cancers. Okay, so, and he has cases, and they've now posthumously been published, that have never ever been matched in the medical literature. So pretty cool guy. That I met him though in the midst of, probably like my third dark night, that was really kicked off by falling in love with Sayer, and having my postcard life, lit up in flames, and understanding that whoever I thought I was, whatever I thought I had figured out, all of the ways that my identity was keeping me in a surrogate sense of safety were not going to be available to me in this next phase of my life. And, I watched the reconfiguration of my entire life, friends, family, the kind of exposure of so many aspects of my family of origin that I wasn't able to see or reckon with or own previously. And then I started to do work on my childhood experiences and really started to understand that I am in charge. I'm in charge of my life. I'm in charge of my experience and what personal responsibility really consists of. And there's no better way to learn that than in a romantic relationship that is very passionate and very fiery, and where there's a lot of erotic glue, right? Because we've been kind of stuck together since we fell in love, and there have been 12 million moments where we want to run to opposite, ends of the earth. And that process has, broken me down and built me up and helped me to see that the fact that I never learned to feel feelings and experience emotions is probably the greatest handicap that I've been unknowingly struggling with since my childhood, and that I would say has been the driving force and continues to be to this day for my evolution.
I'm so glad you said Sarah, not because I knew what you were going to say in any capacity, but because I met Sarah at that same conference. And Sarah was speaking about nutrition and how it was almost, I went up to him afterward. I said, that was the most poetic, just monologue of what nature, nutrition, food, like every aspect of it, that I was just in awe because, quote, not a doctor, quote, all the different things that you could label him as. And he just had the entire floor just in awe with how beautiful, but also how connected he is to not only the hardcore science, which I would never want to be in a debate with him, but also just the depth of understanding of what spirit and that level of faith is. I think it's such a unique, and one of the things, just to add, one of the things that you said at the conference that will stick with me forever, along with my wife telling me your boots were really something to pay attention to. You said, sometimes the first thing you teach people in that version of you was, instead of symptom fear being the reflexive response, it was symptom curiosity. And I thought that was such a powerful way to just create a little space between whatever that stimulus is and between whatever somebody's natural reflexive response is, that I think just immediately helps somebody breathe, and then for you to say now, or the next version of you, is a depth of faith in the human body that's absolutely unshakable. I mean, that leads into every single person that I've been connected to you through, whether it's Ali Zek's story or Jeff Weitzman's movie that just came out, amazing ways that you've been able to instill, not even, it is a faith, but it's also just this deep rooted belief and mindset that absolutely there's no way that I could be convinced that because you're sitting in front of me, that not only you couldn't navigate this, but that maybe it's actually for you, maybe it's actually that version of you that's trying to reach its way out.
Yes, and that remains, I think, again, one of the defining features of my worldview that allows me to rest at ease, even in the midst of what's going on, because I know that the meaning, and the positive meaning specifically, confers that poetry, that beauty, that inspiration, that kind of you got to laugh at it all. What are we doing here together? Kind of feeling. And that is, I think, what I have in common with my friends, with my circle, with my chosen family, is that we look at life this way. When we experience challenges or adversity, health or otherwise, the first response is, what's this about? It's kind of you can engage this investigative, kind of leaning in energy with your own life experiences, regardless of whether you label them as positive or negative. And I love this, I guess it's a proverb, but Alan Watts, tells the story, and it's one of my favorite videos. I show it to my kids all the time, and I call it the maybe principle. I don't know what it's actually called, but it's this about the story. It's a Chinese proverb, essentially about this man who's brought these horses, and at every turn in this little story, something seemingly objectively positive or seemingly objectively negative happens, and his response is, well, maybe, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. And you see actually what you thought was good turns out to be quote unquote bad, and how we can never be sure. We're so disconnected from our own compass and our own even desires. I mean, that's a big part of the work that I've been doing in my life right now, is really trying to identify what it is that I want. Because when you are in the habit of struggling, as I have been attuned to my entire adult life, pretty much, even when I was in the conventional world, I was always in trouble. I'm just like very conflict oriented person, a fighter, and you can get into the habit of that such that you feel anxiety in calm, in peace, in states of harmony, right? And so when you get beyond that, or you recognize that you're ready to graduate from that way of being, then it's time to understand what you actually want and to be driven by, pleasure and desire and joy. And it's hard, man. I mean, it's humbling how little of an idea of the kind of life experience I long to have I can grasp with detail. And so, I think that coming into contact with this kind of sacred power of attention is part of what that curiosity can bring forth, right? It's like, if I attend to this with a curious, loving, aligned energy, then I'm not activating the habit of warfare with my own body, which we've been enculturated to engage at every turn. I'm not othering my body. I'm understanding it as an expression of my material expression of my soul.
Right.
And my entire neurobiology reflects that, right? So I remain in a state that is totally conducive to not only healing, but seemingly inexplicable shifts in the physical, material, biological realm, right? Become available to me. And, I'm not the only one talking about this. I mean, there's so many people out there, from Louise Hay to Joe Dispenza, so many people talking about these miracle cases, right? And, I love that there's still fundraisers for cancer. And so, I mean, the cure is here, folks. We know it's happening already. We know what it consists of, and that alignment with the body as self and the journey, engaging the journey, right? You are the only one who can decode what's happening. That's scary as hell, right? Because you step out of the comfort of victimhood and dependency and that childlike sense of having this benevolent caregiver, protector in the medical system. You graduate from that, you step out of that, you move beyond the pale and into this space where it's you, it's on you. You're the adult now, right? You're the one who is walking into that wild unknown with no headlamp, and just kind of feeling your way through because you know and trust yourself enough to navigate it exactly how you should. And you recognize that the experience that you're having, and chiefly your narration of it, is making conscious what was otherwise unconscious. It's showing you what's in you. So you can't fight it. You can't run from it, right? It's like punching yourself and hoping you're, gonna beat the enemy up. It's this great existential, that's what's going on here. And once you can kind of work with that, that doesn't mean you have to do it by yourself or you don't get support. I mean, I remember that conference because I have such this deep longing for community and this desire to feel like I belong.
Yeah.
I've had so many experiences in my life that show me I don't belong, right? Including, potentially in the current moment. But I have this longing. And I remember at that conference, I was like, wow, everyone here thinks the way I think, this is so exciting and so amazing. And so that kind of support, you create a field with your loved ones. That's why it's so important, I think now more than ever, to gather with people who share your values. Not so that you can segregate yourself or, sort of become this sort of puritanical island, but so that you can grow the field that then will support you when you waver, will support you when you're afraid, and will reflect to you the truth that you hold when you're in your strength.
It's such a wild journey, to essentially be one of the best of the best in a field that is, the whole depth of the field is telling people that they should never feel. They shouldn't, like, literally never feel. And then the next version of you is realizing that, oh, maybe I don't have that skill set to actually navigate my own feelings or navigate my past or navigate generational trauma and all these things that we know are the repeated stories that eventually we have to reconcile at some point, to the point where now it's like encouraging people. Maybe in my world, we've been like really, really charging people to recognize that community now, like more than ever, especially in alignment with your depth, like the depth of your values, is everything right now. It's absolutely everything, because we've tried to kind of mixed oil and water for so many, decades. And then we sit there thinking that we have to stay in this particular system. But at the end of the day, it's recognizing that maybe everything is encouraging us to exit, to take an exit, to take a break, to actually see, with a little bit of space, maybe a 30,000 foot view, is what we're actually navigating right now. Because I would say that every person in my community that has navigated this process of just really refining who they are and really refining and connecting to their own values, and then building the world around them in alignment with their values, to a point where I think you had something recently, like the phone emancipation. It's like those types of things aren't like, you just don't recognize that it's here and you're lassoed to it forever. There's so much ways that we're tethered to this particular system. One of the questions I wanted to ask you next was, I believe void leads to value. I think the darkness and the challenges in our life always plant those seeds that potentially help us realize what our purpose is. Is there anything in particular that you could verbalize is one of the biggest challenges we face today?
I think it is the terror of isolation from and rejection by the tribe. And that terror is inborn, right? So as mammals, we and specifically as humans, our fourth trimester is spent out of the womb, right? And we are so dependent, yes, not only on, our caregiver for, sustenance and, bodily needs, but actually for touch and for love, right? And we get programmed that if we don't have the love of this caregiver, we will die, right? It's not a luxury. It's not like, oh, that feels nice. And so the fear that arises around rejection or abandonment is existential.
Yeah.
And it's not just a condition of, preferred way of living. And so I think that is being systematically leveraged in this psychological operation to keep people in compliance and obedience, and to keep them from questioning whether something is right for them above and beyond, what is right for the masses, or independent of, because that fear of standing apart from is so immense that people will conform to lunacy. I mean, a truly, truly irrational, bizarre states of insanity. And that becomes the norm, right? Where people who are in their rational minds, out of their limbic system, thinking clearly, are marginalized as the insane ones. And of course, my perspective is that we are holding down, critical thinking and free thought. while so many are captured by their fear and their limbic systems, and that's not to say that I don't have fear, that's not my implication, but I don't have as readily captured a fear of being isolated, maybe because I know that I have that fear, right? So if you're not aware of, these shadow elements, they do control your behavior. And I do think that's why, so many doctors, for example, and clinicians don't stand up when they know, what's going on, because the risk is not just the risk of losing their license or their practice shutting down, it's the risk of losing the tribe, right? Of being out cold in the dark. And that risk is almost never worth taking, right? So that's why and how, there is this, this cult of conformity that is imposed on the masses, and it works, right? I say all the time, it's not about them, right? The cabal, the controllers, the deep state any longer. This is us. It's about us. I'm in Miami, and, right now there aren't expectations for, masks are kind of optional and whatever. And I personally don't wear a mask. And so I've watched from that very polarized perspective, this whole process with great curiosity, from my vantage point. And now I'll be in a store or, a restaurant or something, and literally 90% of the people will be wearing a mask by choice. No one is enforcing it. No one is saying that they have to. So now what's going on, right? So what's going on is that we have, it seems, that we are operating from our traumas. And it's like a prism, like what angle is it reflecting through your trauma? And, for me, my relationship to, authority is a defining feature of my trauma response. And I will never allow my body to be co-opted, penetrated, or otherwise managed, in a way that is not my preference, my desire, or my will. And then there are others who will readily sacrifice their body to retain that positive relationship with seeming authority. And that trauma bond is, is built in their childhood. It's not coming forth now. So this is deep stuff, right? We're not going to, that's why I'm sure you've had debates and conversations, and I don't know, maybe you've had more success, than some of us, but that's why this isn't about information. It's not about science.
Yeah.
What's happening now is about deep rooted defenses and emotions that are so intolerable to experience that we will do pretty much anything on either side to keep from experiencing that depth of existential terror.
And then when you recognize that there are things such as psychological operations, it's like, then once, like you're saying, if you know that you have that fear, then you can transcend that fear. You can navigate that fear of losing the tribe, of being ostracized, or whatever it is. But if you also know that there are players, that are pulling several of the puppeteer strings out there, like then you can start to like see it. And so for us, I'll be honest with you, we didn't do anything in the beginning besides just tell people, guard yourself from the fear, the tsunami of fear that's going to come. Like, it's not even like a little bit about the death or the cases count. It's going to be like this tsunami wave of fear and anxiety that will never let up. Little let ups, but you're going to have to give away your rights to actually, receive what those little let ups of fear and anxiety are. And then I started to recognize, like, I'd walk into the office and I just wear a mask with a new patient. I was just like, do you need me? I just asked one day, do you need me to wear this? And everybody said no. And then 80% of the people took their mask. I'm like, we're in freaking San Diego, California. Everybody wears a mask. Every single person must wear a mask, because if you don't wear a mask, then you're definitely not part of the cool crowd, And then on the opposite end, I just started to like ask little like small questions here and there. And then all of a sudden, nobody's wearing masks except for the people who still somehow find us by way of their own journey. And then when we still ask them, we're like, do you, like, we say pregnancy, never. Children, never. Special needs, never. History of trauma, especially PTSD. We have 33% military in our practice, never. And when you engage people in that, they're like, that makes a lot of sense. I'm like, yeah. So when you see people, it's virtually everybody in my practice then, because I'm a prenatal and pediatric chiropractor, like nobody's wearing them. And the people that choose to, hey, we love and serve you no matter what. And we're going to do small little bits and pieces of education so that we can potentially shift that. And some people never do. And that's fine. That's their journey. You know, we don't ostracize them on the reversal end, nor we sit back and we really just say, do these people need our service more or less? You know, do we need to love and serve them more or less? And all of my staff are like, more. And we're like, okay, so let's drop all those reverse discriminations and recognize that these people are potentially coming to us because we have an opportunity to actually start the re-educational process that helps them transcend this entire crazy time. You know, I started to realize that here and that gave me a real belief, like real deep-seated belief here in California, where we ended up having 2 live events. One was 1,000 people in December last year, and one was 1,500 people in March. And we recognized like that people could be standing next to each other, literally covered by this, and they believe the same things about this, but they would never engage each other in that conversation because of the potential belief of what that other person would have about them. And it was such a wild, like cathartic moment, because then it just dropped all things, all potential hesitations for me just to navigate the world however I want to. And whenever somebody approaches me to tell me what to do, then I'm like, you actually can't do that. And this is the way that I navigate things. And this is the way my child is going to see me navigate things. And I hope that's okay, you know, and if it's not, then you go that way and we'll go that way and enjoy your day. You know, I'm really curious if you could also verbalize what's the big kind of purpose and like mission behind what this version of you is doing now.
I'd love to add a little nuance quick to that reverse discrimination comment, and then I will address this big question. Yeah, because I've considered this a lot, right? Because, you know, there was a genius arm of the PSYOP. I'm sure you had some relationship to with this concept of vaccine shedding, right? And hopefully I can talk about these subjects with you. Yeah, okay. I figure, you know, and I watched that and I even felt a little bit of it, right? So at the beginning of, you know, sort of the seeding of social media, which I do believe was strategic and you know, what Cheryl Atkinson calls astroturfing, right? So it's like, right, seeded and fake news essentially is seeded, and then people perceive it as real, and then it becomes real. It's an amazing phenomenon. And anyway, so when this concept of vaccine shedding started to emerge, you know, at that time I was, you know, I go to this like boot camp class in Miami, and it's, you have a partner who's like a stranger, and we're like sweating on the machines together and whatever. And literally 2 times in a row, like, you know, my partner's got like a Band-Aid on their arm and tells me that, you know, proudly that they just got vaccinated. And this gym had been like no masks, nowhere at all. And it was amazing, very sovereign, right? Like it wasn't like a rallying cry, like we're anti this or pro this. It's just sort of like, we're here to work out. If this works for you, cool. If not, there's another gym down the street. Anyway, and I found myself being like, oh, what's getting up on my body here, you know, as I'm getting all in this woman's sweat. And that I immediately caught myself because I understood what they were, quote unquote, they were doing, right? What the nature of this layer, this wave was about, which was, you know, I don't believe in germ theory, so I am not susceptible. You can cough and sneeze on me all you want. I am not susceptible to that and have not been for many years. But that consciousness of being randomly, right, like without meaning, purpose, you know, personal sort of vectorization, randomly contaminated by another human body. Mm-hmm. That concept, here it is, alive and well in me, right? And so I thought, wow, this is what it's all about, the dialectic. And, you know, they had to create this for those who aren't afraid of invisible particles and infection and contagion, right? And that did work, because so many of my colleagues, you know, really got their panties in a bunch about this vaccine shedding concept. And you know, I thought that was really, really powerful. So I completely agree that taking the bait of dehumanization, really, which is what it is, on either side, it's not how we progress and evolve in this process. However, I will say that I think we are not typically conditioned to imagine that there might be consequences around caution,
Yeah.
around measures that would keep us and others safe, and around doing the right thing, right? So that's what virtue signaling is all about, is this deep need that we have, all of us, to be seen as good. And because we've been conditioned as children to understand that there's good behavior and bad behavior. So we hide all the bad parts in our shadow, and then we do our damnedest to present, the parts that allow us to feel empowered and good. And, that's why so many people, for example, wear a mask even when it's not in line with their personal beliefs, or they're not personally afraid, they do it for others, right? And early in this pandemic, I had the experience with friends, not like intimate friends, but very early, like, first couple months. And they wanted us to come for dinner, right? And Sarah and I, and we were like, okay, great, yeah, let's do it. And the dude was like, oh, well, just so you know, like we're social distancing, so just like we're just probably not gonna like hug you when we see you, and we'll just like set the table in that way or whatever. And I was like, no, we're not coming.
No.
We're not coming. And why is because it feels like a pain in my heart to interact with other human beings in a dehumanizing way, right? If I'm going to interact with somebody I care about, I'm going to give them a hug when I see them. And if we have some deep understanding about why they don't want that, we've discussed and explored our needs, that's fine, but that's different. This was a thoughtless, reflexive, oh, I'm being cautious and you're going to respect that. Yeah. No, actually, I'm not, because it doesn't work for me. And that's really why this is such a powerful cauldron, because there's not an obvious way for both sides of the polarity to win. Yeah. And that is the only way that anything ever truly resolves, and any wars actually ever end, is when everyone wins, right? Not when one side wins and the other loses. And that's why we've been in this churn for so many centuries. So I think, I have reflected, when I see a person in a mask, I feel uncomfortable in my body. I don't like it. I don't like not being able to see somebody's face. And when I'm at a restaurant, often, I'll say to the server, listen, like if you're willing to take your mask off, I would feel better talking to you that way. And it took me a long time to get to that point, because there's a gaslighting that goes on.
Yes, there is.
That we're trained around, right? To just pretend it's normal. Can we just, you'll see people like taking selfies and pictures with them, like a mask on, and pretending that is normative human behavior. I will not pretend. And I am guarding the part of me that says, this is really crazy, okay? And it feels really bad. And I actually think that's a very important connection to my own humanity, to not enter into the normalization vibration around this, and to not relent on the discomfort, expressing the discomfort. That does not mean anyone has to do anything differently because I want them to. It just means that I am owning and expressing my needs and my preferences and my experience. They're in the room, right? So it's not just this dominant, like, this is what is good and I'm going to do it, okay? Kind of conversation.
So this might be really good for our listeners. How do you then, well, here's what I'll say maybe before that. I get to speak at the county supervisors meeting today, and I'm going to speak because they just brought these masks back to kids when they go back to school. And I have a unique perspective because I have a practice that sees kids and now helps them navigate these chronic challenges, whether it's, spectrum stuff or neurobehavioral stuff, completely outside of the system. And so these 54% of kids, the 1 in 6 that has a neurodevelopmental disorder, the 1 in 4 that require special needs, we start to see their systems like self-heal and regenerate, like a lot of these different challenges that they have. But that was the acceptable norm before. And what we've seen recently are children who are coming in who won't take this off, who have a deep-seated anxiety for taking that off, or a deep-seated belief and a mindset that their healthy body can harm or kill somebody close to them unknowingly. And so my thought is that I'm going to this meeting at the time of this recording to let them know, just to let them know that the normal before was completely unacceptable, because you just say that, the system says they're just going to grow out of it, medicate them basically for life, keep them stuck in that system. But then we see them heal, and that's a miracle, but it's actually just what they do. That's actually just what the body does. The body heals. On the opposite end, it's like, it's just a mask. It's just a piece of fabric. It's just something that, is covering your face. But in reality, persistent masking is leading to a deep-seated belief system for this next generation that their healthy bodies can kill someone else. So I'm curious how you navigate that. Obviously, I can tell, but I would love for how you and Sayer navigate that with your kids.
So you're probably talking to one of the world's extremists on this.
Of course, but we need to know.
Yeah, my children have never been masked, and as long as I'm walking this earth, they will not be. And that is the energy with which I engage their father and my parents and other caregivers who are involved in their life. It's also why I withdrew them from school.
Yes.
Whenever, God, it feels like 100 years ago, but whenever that was, March of 2020, whatever. And, we were at this Waldorf school that I had really idealized. And idealization is such an important thing to explore at this time, because, these little, the cognitive dissonance that's happening, in relationships, in our relationship to systems and institutions, where we can kind of see like, oh, do they actually give a shit about me? Like, are we actually on the same page? Oh, maybe not. And you can bury that so you can remain connected. And or you can recognize it, integrate it, and then with fresh eyes assess, like, does this actually work for me? And am I willing to risk the loss? Right. Which is often an illusion of loss, because as you said, the void creates this space for values to shift and for change to deliver you to exactly, your destiny, exactly where you're meant to be. So it was scary and painful to take them out of that school, because we thought we really loved it. And wow, they went full Gestapo, this school. Steiner is like rolling over in his grave with what's going on with Waldorf. Yeah. And to me, it's not surprising, because I've also watched all of the spiritual gurus who have public platforms, yoga studios, incense shops, crystal places.
Absolutely.
Be some of the vanguard enforcers of this agenda. And I think the reason is because so many people seek spirituality to avoid their shadows, right? To feel better. Spirituality offers you the promise of feeling better about how broken, damaged, and traumatized you are. Yeah. And if that's all spirituality ever is for you, and it's not about exploring how that which we shame, blame, and condemn is within us, awaiting, longing for integration, then this is what you get. You get so-called spiritual people trying their damnedest to be good and compliant and obedient, so that they can feel, that they have the approval of this projected authority that they're still operating with. They're not sovereign. They have not established a relationship with source. No one who has that under their belt would ever put a cloth on their face, a muzzle on their face, or a needle in their arm. It's just, they're incompatible realities. Okay. So it was, with that I began to explore unschooling, and really found liberation from yet another system, right? Because obviously for a decade I focused on the medical system, and to the exclusion really of the financial and educational. I just, you focus on what you focus on. And so I felt the same feeling of like, oh my God, we're free. You don't need school. Like, it's cool. Yeah. And, of course, I manifested the conditions to be in a position. I used to work 80, 100-hour week. Yes. And now, just on time, I'm in a position to support my children. But I feel so strongly about this issue because I have daughters, because I need to pass on to them, right, for our lineage level healing. This deep, experienced, and lived understanding that they should never do anything to their own bodies for someone else's comfort, pleasure, or appeasement. Period. That includes getting up and giving a seat to an old lady, okay? If they don't want to, do not do it. That your body is your compass, and it should never be violated, not for any reason.
I love it.
And that is, in my opinion, the core of a compassion-driven society. It is not other-oriented. It is not service-oriented. It is not altruistic. Because look at what happens when we think we can engage that without a deep connection to what is right for each of us as individuals. We usher in a new era of fascism on the heels of doing it for others, right? Keep your grandma safe kind of a thing. And children are so easily captured because we haven't broken that conditioning, and they want to feel accepted and loved, and they want to be seen as good. And so and they probably already have this deep belief that something is wrong with them, right? So when a child is abused, he can say, my daddy is bad, right? But what does he do instead? He says, I am bad. I must be bad. And part of that is the wisdom of, the human psyche to retain power, right? Because he can't control daddy. He can control his experience of himself as bad. How does he control that? He develops defenses, coping mechanisms, and strategies to appear as good, right? So children are being systematically programmed behaviorally around that trauma field. And I don't know how it could go another way, right? And not to mention that, all manner of governments are aware that masking is a part of the torture protocol, right? It's a very important part of trauma-based mind control. And so it's not accidental, not to mention the symbology of the muzzle and all the rest. I just don't know that it would be possible to educate a child cerebrally, right? And then tell them, oh, but you just put it on once in a while, or just wear it to school. How could they escape that conditioning? We are conditioned animals in the end. And that's why I have had this very, very, very hard line around this particular and others, but this particular issue that's obviously relevant at the moment.
Well, I'm glad that I welcome that. And it's actually why I asked you. And it's because that is who you have been for me unknowingly, as far as like this beacon that kind of shows us where those hard lines are. And it's impossible to ignore now. It is absolutely impossible to ignore that is the outcome that they, quote unquote, are looking for. And so the medical refugees, especially in California, because of the whole public school laws around vaccine mandates and things like that, they've always struggled with this mantra. It's like homeschool or move, and now it's obviously flooding Florida and Texas and all these states that have just somehow had this radical idea to protect personal freedoms in some respects. But it's an interesting dynamic because we need to hear what those hard lines are in a lot of, in many aspects of those, because what we don't, my kids too, I can still take her and be like, let's go this way. Like if she's, it's like, it's so easy with the toddler versus, my patients that have teens.
Yes. Oh, yes. I just had a conversation with a friend about
excited families, and then different perspectives, husband, father, or, dad, mother, and it's like, the two parents. And it's such a gnarly dynamic to watch, the manipulation, the gaslighting, and then obviously, like you're talking about, like the vitriol between the two, the oil and water nature. But I appreciate you sharing that, because I think the people who want to take that hard line even further and recognize that it is literally saving their kids' lives by keeping them, sovereign, is seeing models of that. We couldn't see enough models of that, in my opinion, at this stage. And so Tell me more about that purpose though.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's a great question because, in my relationship with Sayer, we've been through quite a moment, as I know many people have in their relationships in the past couple of months. Just kind of recalibrating, reconfiguring, understanding that patterns that were informed by our childhood programming are maybe ready to be extinguished, and we're ready to step into something more conscious. And I have come to really understand that, in a polarized relationship, meaning like a masculine, feminine polarity, which is not a gender thing, but often is, there is a way for both of us to win, right? Because the drive to be right, I used to think it was extinguishable, right? When I first entered into the realms of spirituality, I thought, better to heal than to be right, and just surrender that ego and just come to an understanding and agree to disagree and all these things. And then I started to see how deeply entrenched the victim consciousness is, even in people who've been, like myself, have been working on this for many, many years, this self-awareness, meaning that it just hides, right? The ego just keeps hiding. And, I've even seen in myself, like I will be, instead of being right about being wronged, right? The victim consciousness, like I will be right about my awareness of being right about being wronged, right? So that it just keeps finding this other places. So in our dynamic, I've really come to understand that, the feminine, in my case, the woman, is the oracle, right? And that I am here to divine truth, to work with my intuition, to guide us into that dark night and through it, right? And I am the one who knows. And he is the one who protects, right? So he's the protector. He is right action. He is decision making, and he is the fighter, right? So as somebody who probably spent many lifetimes, as a fighter, to put down my weapons in this way is an ego death in itself. But if I can allow my ego to rest in essentially being right 100% of the time. I mean, that's the comportment that we've come to. It's like, he is right 100% of the time about what he feels needs to happen. I am right 100% of the time about what I intuit we need to look at, right? And this has been revolutionary for us. And it's also meant that I am sort of moving away, stepping out of that, sort of like being the Joan of Arc, being on the front lines with my sword aloft, and focusing my energies on tapping into what may serve me, him, our kids, and the collective in terms of, knowledge and, information, and chiefly the experience of the emotional realm. And so I think that, I don't know what my purpose is, but hopefully it's to use the platform that I have built, the opportunities that I have to share, and my voice to empower people to organize around their own gifts. Yeah. And often that's relationally, becomes relationally apparent. And especially, I do think that this polarity sort of play that we're in on so many different levels right now, it's best addressed in relationship, right? And that actually starts within, right? So if you aren't in a relationship, that doesn't mean you don't have to do any work. In fact, it means you have a ramp, with which to work on yourself before you can consciously get into a relationship, unlike the rest of us, right? So, and that polarity within is like, it's the energies of I love the work of Kasia Urbaniak. She wrote a book called Unbound. And, she talks about like the dominant and submissive energies within, and how seldom it is that we occupy energetically one clearly or the other, right? And that will often, she talks about how like, you'll ask your waiter, for a cup of coffee, like he's donating a kidney, like it's like so incoherent and smushed up and mixed up. And that's why we're in this mess of our animal bodies feeling a certain energy from somebody in interaction that their words are not conveying. It's like the wolf in the sheep's clothing or vice versa. And so this kind of polarity work really starts with your own yin yang within. And then you get to work with it in a relationship, and then you get to see it in community, and then you get to look at these big collective issues and see the forces at play and try to divine a way of organizing them into coherence and complementarity. Because as I said, you know, the warfare concept is coming to extinction. And those of us who are interested in creating, envisioning and being the stewards of this, as you know, my friend Charles calls it, the more beautiful world, you know, our hearts know it's possible. We have to step into a new way of relating to upset, adversity, challenges, problems, symptoms, without the reflexive engagement of that warfare impulse that is deeply within all of us.
What do you think the world looks like once we can reconcile a lot of those polarities? And, you know, because a lot of times we fall into, and maybe it's what you were saying earlier about the spiritual leaders that maybe subscribe to like being spiritual just to go back to their lives, just to feel a little bit better, you know, do your toxic lifestyle just a little bit better, versus like really integrating and really finding ways to reconcile that. But I'd love to hear what that vision.
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the challenge. I don't know. Yeah. I really don't know. And I don't have that vision available because I don't know that it's meant to be available yet.
Yeah.
I do think that we are entering into, you know, I talk about kind of like the yin yang of this polarity of human anti-human, right? Pro-human, pro-AI, whatever, polarity play. And that we're organizing, again, for the same reasons, right? Because of our traumas, not that there's good people and bad people.
Of course.
But we're organizing, you know, the white side, which of course has a little black dot, and then the black side, right? And we have to, I think, enter into this moment of very conscious individuation, right? From any tribe, and a sense of who am I?
Great.
And then we organize all those who am I's into these polarities. And I don't know if we are entering a phase where in society there will be almost two societies, right? There will be those who are deciding to get coherent around their relationship to the natural world, to the human body, to other bodies, with this principle of sovereignty at the core, and those who are, you know, more interested in a societal, you know, support network that is contingent upon digital technology and organized around principles of, you know, the hive, also known as an open air digital prison, but whatever, they might experience it differently. Okay, maybe they like it, I don't know. But we'll kind of organize ourselves, and I don't know what that would look like, but my sense is that nodes are forming for this alternative reality, this alternative sense of what society is meant to be. I don't think we are ready for, you know, the light side of anarchy. Of course, that word has been so maligned. Voluntarism is, I think, a word a lot of my friends are using, you know, to signify that there's a way of being that actually requires no hierarchical structure. Imagine, right? No laws, right? So none at all, not the good ones, not the bad ones, none. What would that look like? I don't know that we're ready yet, because I don't know that we've sufficiently done the inner work to take personal responsibility for whatever it is that might manifest in our lives, and the seeming inconveniences and consequences that come with that. You know, I'm just taking one step at a time. That's why I got off my smartphone, because I recognized it was consent. It was consent to a system that I am otherwise, you know, listen, I'm not like many, in that I am oriented in totality against this system, but then I'm, you know, with one hand consenting and enjoying its fruits, you know, like that's incoherent. I still have many areas like that, of course. Still ordering on Amazon, that's the next one to go. But I do think, you know, we're entering a moment, this transition, kind of the bardo, you know, as it's called, which is, it's disorienting, and it's meant to be. It's like the moment that the caterpillar melts in the chrysalis, like it doesn't know what the hell is coming, but those imaginal cells will organize, will come to the fore, and that beautiful butterfly will be born through that tiny squeezed hole of a birth canal, and I do of course have faith that will happen actually in our lifetimes.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that, because I think there's an allure to the pie in the sky, to the always rainbows and puppy dogs, and the level of like vision that people can create, when I ask that question. And I think we're navigating something like personal responsibility right now, which is so, like, it's wild to see like how hard that is for some people to navigate. And so until that is somehow reconciled, then what that vision for that future can actually manifest, not manifest in totality. But I think it also takes you back to what you started with in the beginning. It's a depth of faith, and recognizing that if this is all here because it's for us, then a deep-seated belief in humanity and sovereignty, and whether you believe in it neuroplastically or you believe in it epigenetically, the sovereignty of humanity it's not even arguable. It's by a lot, whether it's biology or it's spirituality, I don't really care at this point. But what I know is that we're all being faced with a huge opportunity to reconcile this first step, which I really, really, really appreciate you sharing about. How do people stay in contact with you?
With my team, we call it the censorship shuffle. Because I've been deplatformed off of Facebook and largely shrunken into invisibility on Instagram, which is fine. Like none of that feels like, oh, wait, for me. It feels like completely fine. I never vibed with Facebook. That's like a burden lifted off my plate. And Instagram, went, self-righteous virtue signaling and dark a while ago.
Yeah.
So I am on Telegram now. I have a channel there. Who knows? I'm not attached to that. I'm ready to move if needed. But that's it for social media. And then, so that's, in this moment, a newsletter subscribership is the best way to stay in touch, because it's the only thing that seems consistent in terms of, sharing new content and, sort of whatever is top of mind for me.
And for those of you who don't know about like the Vital Life Project and Vital Mind Reset, right? Those are programs that I would say, I've been in your community a few times. It's like how you navigate certain things, like because we're trying to build our own little health freedom community as well. And I wanted to see a lot of different models, because I think you're right. These little nodes of community are necessary. And just seeing the two of you, just seeing where you were when I first saw you guys speak and kind of contribute to our community of chiropractic in 2014, and how you've been able to evolve. You've always been that beacon of essentially that personal freedom that I think continues to evolve. And so as you evolve, I hope that it really is resonance with the collective, and many of us who kind of were deep-seated believers in what you're doing then are also the same at this stage. And so keep doing what you're doing, and keep letting us know where those hard lines are, because I think we need models, especially in California. And I am hopeful, because in California, we're seeing a resurgence of this beauty, this beauty of understanding what personal sovereignty is. And so without further ado, my lady, I really genuinely appreciate your time, and I can't wait to see how this episode resonates and reverberates through our universe.
We appreciate you joining us for this episode of the Future Generations podcast. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes and Spotify. For more resources based on today's episode, as well as more ways to inspire a brighter future for you and your family, visit us at thefuturegen.com. That's all available exclusively on thefuturegen.com.